Welcome to the first section, Node.js architecture. This section, what is an architecture really? Architecture is understanding the building blocks of a piece of software, And Node.js and this building blocks are really all about the execution of Node.js. And this is two parts. The first part is the JavaScript execution engine itself, which is, think of it just like hey, I'm delegating this script to this V8 engine to execute it, and it does a thing. How it executed is a different story. Then the other piece is the I/O, which is the input output, which is how do I talk to the outside world, essentially. How do I read from a file? How do I read from a connection? How do I write to a connection? How do I do a socket listening network? How do I write to a screen? Yes, that's another I/O. How do I read from a screen? That's another kind of I/O. So this is the pieces of architecture that understanding it all comes down to one fundamental understanding of the event loop. There's a loop that's going on in Node.js. Let's go a little bit inside here. Let's go through the architecture sections here. So the first thing we're going to do an intro. The second lecture here is we're going to go to the interpreted language and V8. In this particular lecture, we'll discuss what is an interpreted language. It's very critical to understand that, because JavaScript is an interpreted language, right? We're going to talk about what that means compared to a compiled language and where's the role of V8. We're also going to dive deep into how V8 works. So this is where it's going to be an interesting lecture here. We'll talk about how V8 handles JavaScript, right? So if you're interested in this stuff, you might love this lecture. Then we're going to dive into the main event loop. The event loop, why do we need a loop to begin with? What's that for? We're going to understand that there is anything we do, anything in software, there is always a reason behind it, right? We faced a problem and we needed a solution. The event loop was one. You, the listener, the watcher, the engineer, you might come up with a completely different design that solves that major problem. That's why I always like to present you with a problem and I tell you this is how we solved it. But hey, you don't have to listen to anyone. Build your own path. And anything that is in your gut that talks to you, that's the truth. Follow that. Forget about all this crap that I'm going to tell you here. It's just, hey, this is what we know. By the end of the course, we know what I want you to do. If you get anything from this course, by the end of this course, I want you to destroy everything that you learned. And then I want you to build something from scratch. That's the desire that I want you to get out of this. It's like, I like Node.js, I understand it, but it could be built better. It could be enhanced. You might be an open source contributor to this beautiful technology. You may decide, like Bun, go and build your own path. Guess what? Bun is not perfect. Bun is making mistakes. They are doing their own path. They might nail some things, be better than Node. They might go and do something else, and they will definitely run into obstacles. Nothing is perfect. The key, understand the limitations and build what you want, essentially. But outside of this realm here, let's go back. The main module, very critical. It's also called the initial phase. This is my favorite phase. This loop is actually a bunch of phases. It's like, okay, go here, then here, then here, then here, then here. And this one, the main module, is the most important one. This is the main, if you have ever written C code, this is the main function. It runs the first thing before the event loop gets executed. Before this loop get run. Modules are executed here. If you have like a loop that does a lot of computation, that will run here first. If you have variable initialization, it will be done here first, right? So watch out for this phase. It might slow down the initial event loop. Timers phase. The first phase, really the true first phase, is the timers. This is where timers are done. What is timers? What is a timer? This is one of the most, it sounds easy, but it's not kind of a phase. Because timer, how do you do a timer? You think that's like, oh, I'm gonna set a timer and then I'm gonna wait for it to pop. How do you really implement this? We're gonna talk about this. It's very hard to get a timer nailed, and this is one of the most important things to understand. When you do a timer, if it says, hey, execute this code in a second, you're not gonna get a second. You're not gonna get it before, definitely, but it's not immediately a second. It might be a second and a few milliseconds. It might be 5 minutes later. Yeah, 5 minutes later. I'm not joking. It depends, again, on your understanding of what you're doing, really. If things are slowing down, the timers will slow down, and we're going to show that. Pending callbacks phase. One of the things that really need to set up, there's a, hey, this is one phase that I delayed some of the stuff. It's time to do it right here and there. Idle prepare phase, another internal phase for Node.js. We're going to talk about that. In order to do I/O, you need to set up I/O, like epols and IOU ring. You need to set up stuff, and this is where things are set up. Poll phase, truly one of the most important phases in the event loop. This is where actual I/O is done. This is where a read is getting executed. This is where a write is getting executed. And this is where the callbacks from the read or the writes are getting executed. And be careful. I/O, when I read and I got my result from the read, these are two different events. Understand those. We're going to talk about this stuff. Check phase, right after the poll phase. To delay things from the poll, you can do a set immediate and to delay stuff and go to the next check phase. We're going to talk about that. Close callback phase. Hey, I'm going to close my socket, and you want to delay as much as possible closing the socket, because sometimes with TCP especially, there is always delays, right? So if you put it at the end, there is chances that you're gonna packets that might have been delayed that have already been received by the time you finish the check phase, right? So it helps that to put all the closing events at the end. Yeah. Process next tick. Another important thing. This is not a phase per se, but actually exists in literally after every single phase, right? We're going to talk about what that is really. How promises work under the hood. You're going to, spoiler alert, promises async await are all sugar, syntactic sugar on top of callbacks. If you understand callbacks, you will understand promises. They're just syntax, nothing more. A little bit of a difference with next tick. We're going to talk about that. Require versus import. Well, to import a module, I can use a require or I can use import. What is the difference between those two, guys? Right? The anatomy of node packages. Dude, packages, NPM, yarn, if you use that. How does packages really work behind the scenes? To understand packages, you have to build your own package. And then you understand all this stuff that is happening behind the scenes. We're going to dive into how node packages work, the package.json, the package lock.json. Why do we have all this stuff? There's always a reason. And then finally, that's the architecture, these pieces, right? When does node really terminate? Because sometimes I run a code, I run node, and the node process doesn't terminate. Why? Again, all comes back to the understanding. Once you understand what works, what is happening behind the scenes, all these kind of have answers. They answer themselves. Let's jump into this section, you guys.